Play, Watch, Listen is supported by Patreon, who actually got this episode unedited, early, and ad-free. If you want to support the podcast, check the link in the description. Hello, everyone. I'm going to do the intro at the start of the show.
Boy.
Is everybody recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alana Pierce. I'm a video game writer. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. That's Austin Winter. He's a video game composer. And that is Troy Baker. He's a video game actor. It's going to be a short episode. Last of Us Episode 3 came out Sunday night. I did not cry because I am...
You were all tepid to it.
Very tough.
You're cool.
Extremely tough person.
Sucked that tear back up into those tear ducts. You get back in there, you motherfucker.
But, there's something...
Not on my watch.
Sometimes I watch things and I look at it and I go, damn, I wish I had thought of that. A story about two people living alone in an apocalypse who just fall in love, and the way that plays out is such a fucking perfect hour or whatever it was. It was incredible. 15. It was so well done that I was like, what a simple premise that is so pointed to the what I keep saying The Last of Us is about, which is not zombies and it's not an apocalypse. It's the relationship between two people and humans and what matters to you. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking, and I didn't know Nick Offerman had all that in him. They were both incredible, but I'm so used to seeing him as Ron Swanson that I was like, holy shit, dude, amazing. Top to bottom, absolutely adored it.
Craig Mazin talks about Vince Gilligan, obviously with Bryan Cranston, loves to cast comedic actors in dramatic roles because he understands that there's a dramatic side to them, and Craig knew that about Nick from the onset. But the thing that I commend him the most about, and we get into this in the conversation of the podcast, which is he said this is a story about long-term committed relationships, and specifically that long-term committed relationship between two middle-aged men. So he said, Craig, I am a middle-aged married man. I can't tell that story, but what I can do is partner with other people who can help me tell my story. He goes, you really got to do your homework. He goes, so what do? We hired Peter Hoare, who's the director of that episode, who's a middle-aged gay married man.
Super happy to hear that.
Cinematographer is a middle-aged gay married man. Our editor was a middle-aged gay married man. That's it's awesome. We are literally putting this through that lens because we want to get it right. And that is why I feel like they did, was because the desire was not to, now let's do a gay episode.
It didn't come across that way at all.
At all. I could show that to any... I could show that, I think, to the staunchest evangelical Christian who at least had an open heart and go, tell me that's not love. Tell me that's not a perfect example of it.
What it struck me as also watching it was... I sometimes folks will. There's the recurring accusation is that a story like that is kind of ham-fisted in just for the sake of it, and I found myself thinking that in the context of the story of the collapse of the world and of people, and particularly the idea that the story as a whole is about Joel finding and embracing his purpose, like The Last of Us being about that, and this being a little kind of bottle episode that gives us somebody else to use as our Joel stand-in in a way.
It still ends with this whole other the kind story. Of men we are. It still ends with the note being like, "Hey, this is the kind of men we are." And it still so pushes it to him.
Yeah, and I listened to the podcast that Troy did with Neil and Craig, and I so recommend it. There's a lot of really fascinating and powerful insights, but I actually found that what I was going to say was that the thing that struck me was that the idea that that for Bill, it's sort of a coming out of sorts story, and that serves the idea of discovering one's purpose far better than if it was a conventional straight romance. Every single detail, if it's a middle-aged, straight relationship story, it could have been very powerful, but there was something about somebody having to kind of simultaneously embrace multiple realities that they're initially uncomfortable with, and then completely finding themselves in that it made it land so much harder. It was one of those where I said, I can't see the argument that this is somehow inorganic to the larger narrative.
Nice.
Like I
Speaking
can see that complaint, and whether I agree or not, I can understand it in certain cases when I see certain shows or movies or whatever. People will go like, it felt like they were ticking a box. We need a gay character, or we need a this or that.
I think that
sometimes I go, look, I can see that. I don't necessarily agree, or it didn't bother me, but I can see how it might look that way if you're kind of looking through that lens. But in this case, boy, did I not feel that way. It was just as someone who is better for this.
As someone who is not straight, there are absolutely like movies and TV shows where I go, that felt inorganic. That felt like you did that in order to get that audience or to get that reaction. That does exist. We can't pretend that doesn't exist. In this case, not even a little bit. Like, you're right that I think it suits the story.
Never mind that it is in the original also, just in a very different form.
Someone needed... There have been a lot of comments flying about that. I was like, I can't believe they made this change. They're like, they didn't.
People did that with part 2. They made Ellie gay. Like, oh, you didn't play Left Behind. Come on now.
Did you, when you were on the podcast, did you get into the changes that were made, like in terms of like making it more like positive representation? Was that something that was like an intentional choice, or in the sense that they were a happier couple in the show than they are or that is implied in the game, right?
Yeah, one of the
was
things
that like something that was worked through. I'm just interested, not in a negative way. I fucking loved the episode, but I'm just interested in the kind of the process.
Craig wanted to show the relationship and the arc of the relationship, and for speaking, Austin, to what you talked about, the issue of purpose, where literally that is what Bill says to him at the very end, was that I am old, I'm satisfied, and you were my purpose. And that's just what an amazing summation of that entire argument.
So it's about it being a more satisfying kind of
it's like we lived. Come on,
emotional payoff.
Well, it's about tying into the theme, right? Like,
well,
if
not
it's
only
just
that,
about
but
the bad
nobody
relationship.
stays together for 20 years. If there's not some good moments, if there's not good times.
Oh yeah, no,
times.
for sure.
I love the
putting that on
line,
display
some
was
of my
important.
worst days ever have been with you. Because I love that was also listed there and is a reality of a long-term relationship.
I'm not going to say that every day was a gift. I love that. And he's holding his hand as he says it too, but there's been far more better days. And that to me, and also I love the notion that there is this, even through all of that there was never a moment where they said, even as just a couple bottles of wine too many or whatever, the necessities of convention, like getting married, no longer apply, but that there is this like, there's one more thing we got to do. And if we're going to go out, or if I'm going to go out, I want to go out like this. Yeah. And it's just, there's not a single thing that they missed on this one. So much so, even starting from the very beginning, some other stuff got pointed out. The fact that there's been this long-running mystery and kind of like people that love to dig deep into the lore of where the cordyceps first broke out. Not the location, but like what caused it. And there was this theory about the bread theory, or the bread conspiracy.
That happened so fast.
Right.
It was cool.
And there's something that Joel glosses over very quickly is that he explains that most people think it's a flour and you put that in something that everybody has. Well, what were the two things on day one that he was supposed to have? Pancakes for breakfast and a birthday cake.
And they couldn't, right?
No, he forgot it. He forgot to get the pancakes, and he forgot to get the cake.
I didn't notice that. That's a lovely idea.
They came this close to Joel being and Sarah being along with everybody else. So the thing to me that I love about that is it's very easy for us to look at our mistakes as failures. And sometimes our mistakes lead us to a different path, but they could clearly in this story lead us closer to our true purpose.
Can I ask, Troy, I'm not sure if you know the answer. This is one thing in this episode that I wasn't sure about, that like I've never had more faith that a show will address or answer to every question I have than I do right now. I'm like, you've got this, don't worry about it. But the Ellie choosing to cut open the
clicker.
Yeah. What was that about?
She's violent. She has a violent heart. And that will be her violence and Joel's vulnerability to me are the two things that are in one side of the scale that are constantly in play with each other. And you see that from the very beginning when in episode 1, Joel beats the fuck out of that guy, out of the Fedra dude. She leans in and looks and she wants to see versus what Sarah did, which was she was catatonic. She was traumatized by seeing the violence of something that was clearly intent on hurting them. And instead of being proud of her dad going, thank you for protecting me, she was like, what the fuck did you do? So, and what is Ellie constantly asking for? Give me a gun, I want a gun, I want a gun. And this is someone who... Huh?
Like, I would have given her the gun. I keep being like, there is a whole wall. Just the circumstances.
Maybe there'd be a Last of Us Part 3.
Yeah, I'll pitch that story. I think for me as a dad, it's the thing that I don't want my failures to be passed down to Traveler in any way.
Right.
And so sometimes what that can lead to are aversions. To the things that I had that happened to me when I was a kid was I almost drowned a couple times and I've choked. And so the two things that I'm terrified for Traveler are those two things. And so, but that doesn't mean I keep him out of the pool, but I've been very, I will strap floaties around that kid's body every which way I can just to keep him afloat. And what that's for me, that's fully self-serving because what I'm trying to do is satisfy my fears as opposed to do what I should do, which is we need to teach you how to swim and we need to teach you to have awareness in the water and we need to teach you how to get rid of your choking. What do you do? So I think that's what we're seeing with Joel is I failed in this and I could have protected her and my daughter got shot. And so what I'm going to do is make sure that I don't ever put her around a gun if I don't have to. And somehow he feels like he can handle a gun, but that she can't.
Yeah.
I know
really
it's a
like
short
as well,
one, but I
also-
got to bounce because I have a call starting now.
You have a Mick
All
call?
right, bye.
I
You're
have a Mick
never-
call.
I was going to say a meeting. I have
I'm
a Mick
loving
call.
it. Play it on the keyboard, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it
Doing
with
the new
Ronald
jingle.
McDonald and Grimace?
Carry
Is
on,
that who's
carry
on
on.
your call?
It's a Scottish person. He's on the
I'm
call.
sorry, Hamburglar, you're muted. How
So-
can I list that many characters from McDonald's?
Yeah, that's a hell of a universe. The other thing
That's
that obviously
impressive.
this episode changes. I mean, it changes. It's been some of the discourse has been frustrating, and I don't want to address it. It's either that he was a side character and it didn't matter, so why was it a whole episode, or he was super important, so why did you change it? But this
Both of those arguments are stupid, obviously.
They're just uninformed.
they're just different opinions.
Well, and
So
it's
I wasn't
honestly
gonna
their
say they're
answers so
stupid.
simply because we could.
No, I can say they're stupid because I'm not
Okay.
related in
Yeah,
any way to
because
the
it's
franchise.
good.
I can say
Good.
it's an adaptation. Things were changed because
Oh,
a
I'm
new
so
art
I've
team
said this
wanted
from
to
the
make a
fucking
great thing.
beginning, and Troy kept racing me for this episode. He kept being like episode 3, and it genuinely is one of the best episodes of TV ever. Like I thought
Yeah.
it was just so
It hits hard.
beautiful.
There
But
are
it does
few
mean we
episodes of
lose-
television where I could just drop you into. You don't have to know anything about the
I
story.
agree. I agree.
And just go blip, watch this. If you do, go back and watch 1 and 2. Watch 3
It's
again.
like
you'll
Alana
cry.
said, that would be one hell of a movie in
I
its
was
own
mad,
right.
dude.
It
I was
was.
like, fuck, that's
It was
a good
2
choice.
hours.
It does like on the representation aspect, like obviously a completely different thing, but like it's so rare to see a long-term relationship represented. I realized this as I was watching it, like as someone who's, I've been with Kerry 18 years, like I'm nearly at the tipping point of spending more of my life with her than without.
Oh,
Yeah.
when you got together.
Like I was 18.
Aw.
Yeah,
You're
I know, right?
42.
Wait a
Oh,
minute.
Troy. You had me for like a
Yeah,
split
I was
second.
like, hang on.
The joy that springs up.
Oh,
The
it's
wellspring of
beautiful.
joy. Go ahead. Sorry.
But no, I was just saying, like it's something that actually genuinely watching it, I was like, I don't get to see the kind of relationship I have like in TV shows that often, like or movies, because like it's usually considered not very interesting, right? Like no one wants to see a boring story about two people who love each other very much.
I think-
but this shows how you can do that and how you can put an interesting spin on it and
Yeah.
contextualize it. I
think
thought it was
they-
beautiful.
They also broke some rules in terms of kill your gaze. And what's the other one? There was something else that I was like, there's a thing you're
What do
not
you mean?
allowed to do. Oh, well, there's some rules that you're not supposed to break that I think, like, if you try and play too safely within lines or you don't take risks with storytelling, like having side characters be the focus of a whole episode would be breaking a rule of a convention. Killing your gays in terms of two gay people dying is something you're not supposed to do. All these like
it's a
and in some
cliche
cases, I think
like,
killing your
can
gays is
be
totally
seen
fair.
as
It
negative
is
for
not
sure.
here.
Yeah.
Well, it's used often, and it drives me nuts. Like it's the same as a woman sexually assaulted, and then that's her arc to become a badass.
Yeah.
The accused,
Those kind
which
of things.
got
Or
her the Oscar.
fridging, or any of the. That's the thing is there's a lot of things that have been handled lazily in the past, and avoiding them now.
Right, and some
is
people
one
might be
solution,
like,
or doing them well.
Let's just
I guess
not do
would be
it.
the-
Let's just not do it.
But what I love about both
wasn't an
Craig
issue here.
and Neil is that, and specifically speaking to that trope, they lean into it. And that's why Bill says this isn't the tragic end. This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play.
Well, that's
He
part
goes,
of it too, is romanticizing suicide. Again, a lot of rules broken, but they're not breaking him in the way that I think is the problem. Leaning into it probably was the best call. It was like, let's acknowledge what's happening here.
Let's acknowledge what happens
see the
in this
challenges, go for
world.
it.
This is what you do. And again, I think that the intention behind it, most people will do that for sensationalism purposes.
Yeah.
As a shortcut to a gut punch. And what Craig was doing was like, no, I'm going to lean into this and go, this is not what this is. All right. And to be almost, he could turn to camera and say that down the lens and say, I know what you're thinking that I'm doing, and I'm not doing those things. I think that the term representation, I can't speak to the gay relationship, but what I can speak to is representation of exactly what Mike was talking about. Is like, what does a committed relationship look like? And that representation, that whole layer of representation was so accurately depicted as well, where you go from this moment of intimacy and the first sexual encounter, smash cut to, oh, fuck you. You know, that to me was, and it's not a
The show's brilliantly edited, and I feel like that's the thing I'm not seeing.
brilliant, and that
Editing's
shit is
fantastic.
like, I know where we need to go from here. I do want to speak a little bit to, again, to the incredible production design. So much of like it's been lauded that this is like the most expensive show that HBO's ever done, and it's easy to look at that and go, I don't understand how. Everything goes up on the camera, you know, up on the screen, and that town they built. And what's incredible is there are no roofs on those houses.
Right.
Oh, they built it up to this level and then
That's
extend.
all
Or is it
VFX.
all blue? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
it didn't to me, and I'm looking at this going, what
I
the
never would
fuck?
have guessed.
And they're like, oh, that's all VFX because first of all, it's too expensive, takes too much time, and we can't light, we can't move cameras inside that house, we can't do anything that we need to do, and we're going to go inside that house. So here's what we need to do. And so like the Coppola,
Also, the interiors are also, it's all one set. Like you're in the exterior, and then that literally leads directly into an interior on the
yeah,
same
because like
set.
that shot
That's
of him
fascinating.
walking out the front door or
Of course,
wheeling
yeah,
him
hadn't
inside the
occurred to
front
me,
door.
but, you know, normally you'd film the interiors in one set and then you do your exterior. That's wild. That part, that's genuinely impressive. But I hadn't watched the second episode when we talked last. I caught up on it. And I wanted to say to you, Troy, because it was just an amusing thing where I was watching it and I was like, oh, I know this. I've been to this museum. I've been to this museum in Boston, and I have been to Boston once. And I've been to a museum, but I didn't go to that museum. And it took me a good 5 minutes to be like, no, you're remembering playing the game. You're remembering this as a feel. You're remembering this as like I've been in here.
I think I
There was a
went
thing
to the
chasing
University
me.
of
I
Eastern
remember
Colorado
that.
once. I believe I visited that school.
But
that
it was just this
completely
fantastic
fictional school.
moment of but that was just for
Familiarity.
me. That was fun because that sense of reality, that sense of
Episode
this is
2,
a place.
the way it looked blew my mind. But also, after I played part 2 and then I went to Seattle again, I was like the whole city feels really different once you've been there. And I had that when I first came to LA too.
Dude.
I was like, holy shit.
LA's the one that
everything
really
is
freaks you
video
out because
games.
you've seen it so many times in so
Yeah.
many things.
The one
it
that
was
gets
LA
me-
memory, and
If I'm on, to this day, I'm still this way. We'll be driving on the 1 coming up from Santa Monica back home or whatever. And we pass this one, there's the Malibu Pier, and I look at that and I'm just like, GTA.
Yes.
I know exactly where I'm at right now in GTA.
I also do
and
it
I look
with,
where there's
Tony
the
Hawk.
entrance ramp. Huh?
So one of the pro skaters, I don't remember which Tony Hawk game it is, but you grind on that Santa Monica pier.
Yeah.
I'm always like,
I know exactly where I am
did
right
that?
now.
Yeah.
But I don't
So
think
funny.
I've ever seen it done from. I don't think I've ever had that experience watching an adaptation from
Sure, yeah.
games. I don't
It's
think I've
incredible.
ever. And there are good adaptations and stuff, but like, or ones that have done a good job of reproducing the visuals. But that was the first time I had a real sense of like familiarity with the space, with the geography of it. That was intriguing, and it's not about authenticity. It was just about it captures. It's really doing a great job of capturing and bringing forth what worked in the game for that.
It looks
So I
incredible.
think that's
Yeah.
very interesting.
I
feel
across
like-
the board, the sets, and it's unbelievable. Like it's
We've said for
Yeah, it feels familiar, but also elevated.
we've said for a while, like, this is like the best time for television. Like, there's so much, like, television's where it's at. What I feel has happened literally in the last couple of years, and even somewhat so in the last year, is there have been lessons that have been gleaned from what's happening inside of the ecosystem of television that have impacted the way that we look at content, view content, like literally the way that we consume it, the way that we examine it after we've viewed it. And I think that this is, I would put this out to anybody who's making something right now. The reason why this is successful is because it is 100% devoted to doing something with excellence rather than carrot on a stick, worm on a hook, bait. And there's an easy trap to fall into right now of sacrificing quality or sacrificing integrity in order
That's why
to meet
I
some
don't even know
demands.
that I would think we're in a great state for television. And I think, again, I don't watch a lot of good TV. It's my own fault. But that The Last of Us is standing out to me for that reason. It's standing out to me as like, the part with in Jakarta, the scientist is in the morgue, and I was like, any other network, that would have been a jump scare. And I was like, this is HBO. They're not going to do that. That's cheesy. Why on earth would you do that? But I was like, if this were any other show, they probably would have jump scared us in that moment. But this isn't what the show is doing. And I think
It's all
episode
about
3
respect,
is
right?
Well, once you do a jump
respecting
scare,
you
you
as an
lose
audience
tension.
and respecting the material.
Yeah.
You lose tension if you do the jump scare. So that's a setup for the tension. So you don't want to let the tension
you
off.
just have to
So
sit
you
in
keep
it.
the tension.
But
But
I
I
think
think-
like episode 3, you're right in terms of excellence. Is like, again, I appreciate the breaking of rules. The rules are arbitrary. It's so many things that so many other people, given the storyline, would never have done that. They wouldn't have had that episode focus on these two people who aren't the two main characters. They wouldn't have done a million things that they did there. And the fact that it was executed so confidently and so just like, this is what we're doing, this is what this story is. I just thought it was just, again, one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen.
It also, though, what I thought was really impressive, and this speaks to the editing side as well, like, it also, though, I'd seen people reacting to it, and I knew enough about, the story that I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be the special episode, this is going to be that episode of Mythic Quest, this is going to be that episode of, where you go after some side
This is your
characters.
awards episode.
It's a
This
bottle
is your
episode.
awards episode.
Yeah.
But so that was what I went in thinking, but there's some travel in terms of the storytelling with Joel and Ellie that I was genuinely surprised by.
Yeah.
I thought we weren't going to get like those characters. It works both as a bottle. You've got that bottle episode, but that's like 50 minutes of the episode. It's also using that as a moment of catharsis for the Tess fallout. We're using that as it's almost using that as like a fable to process Joel's feelings
Dealing with
and the
death,
audience's feelings about that.
progression of a
like
relationship.
it's pulling a lot of moves there, and then you've also got the stuff with Ellie, and then foreshadowing of future relationships, I presume, with Ellie. Like, there's just a lot of stuff there that's very clever in
It's
terms
all
of
on
what
point, yeah.
how it's placing that. It's not just going to one side and going, here's here's award Emmys. Look, Offerman, he's good. You like him?
He is very
It's actually
good.
doing. He is very good, but it's also propelling our protagonist forward, which I thought that's a very clever balancing act.
I would definitely encourage people to go back and watch it. One of the reasons why is Pamela and I were watching it Sunday night, and when it starts by the river and Joel is stacking the rocks, she was like, I forgot. Like, I remember it starting with the whole underground, not today, you jackboot fucks. Which, by the way, was Craig wrote that in the parentheticals of the stage direction just to kind of like let the actor know this is kind of what Bill is thinking, and he does that in his writing. And Craig does a much better job of Nick Offerman, but Nick was basically like, just to let you know, I'm saying that line. So that was originally just internal monologue or internal dialogue, rather. But there's a lot that I think people will miss exactly what you're talking about, as far as there's a lot of ground traveled with Joel and Ellie in the beginning and the end.
Yep.
That is definitely worthy of. There's the wonderful arcade moment that happens in the very beginning. There's the great revelation and further delving into Ellie's violent side. So definitely go back through, and you'll just expect you're going to cry again, because I did just as much the second time as I did the first time, which speaks to the profundity and the beauty of the episode. But
yeah, it's the one thing, I think I said this last week, that I'm still like, again, with full faith in the project entirely, that I'm still like, Ellie's so mean in this version. I feel like she's so much nicer in the game because I'm playing them side by side. But I was like, writing for TV and writing for games are two very, very different things. You have to pace it differently. And I'm like, if she has to have an arc where we see her go on this journey, you can't have the arc start on episode 3. It's too soon. And I'm like, I'm
also, she functions in the gameplay in the game. Like, you have to have
care
her
about
throwing
her
you stuff. But you have to have her. She has to feel like someone you're protecting and someone who's protecting you. It's that thing in video games writing, which even something like Last of Us, which pushes the writing toward more televisual, let's say, and I mean that as a compliment in this case.
Televisual.
Just in terms of it's very episodic. Like Last of Us is clearly written in kind of. Last of Us is written a bit like a HBO show, which I think is one of the reasons it's kind of translating well, and it allows for that thing.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is most games writing, it's all fun and games. So like in the classic kind of all the how to write screenplays books, fun and games is like the bit in the middle of your movie, which is in all the trailers, right? It's that second act, and video games are all second act. You have to kind of basically, in traditional game storytelling, you compress your first act to next to nothing of like, hey, here's the Space Marine, and I guess he wants to save the princess, and that's your entire first act. Then your entire game is 2 acts.
I don't think 3-act structure works in games.
There is
it doesn't.
But
my point is that's the entire point I'm making, which is in terms of like relationship development, you have to rush. Even in something like Last of Us, you have to make Ellie warm to Joel faster than you would in a TV show where you can actually linger. You can have the audience be like, Ellie seems like a bit of an asshole for like a few episodes, and that's okay because there's time for that to breathe. Whereas I think in the game you kind of have to get to the point a little faster.
Totally, because you have to care about her. You have to be willing to escort her because you are doing it yourself. She has to help you. It's very different.
And Last of Us, the game is so well written that is kind of made to feel natural and made to feel good, and still has that emotional arc. But it's almost like by necessity of the medium, the writer has to kind of speed up that opening just a little bit more. And I think the show is allowing that just a bit more time to breathe. Than you do in the game. That's my opinion, but it's like it's definitely a writing challenge. I'm sure you come across this, Alana, like. Because the verbs of a game are go to place and do a thing, like it doesn't leave a lot of room sometimes to kind of
writing it at SMS for I think 2.5 years now, and every day I learn more and more that creative writing on video games, actually it's across the board. I'm like writing a screenplay right now as well. It's not that creative. It is, but it's very technical. Writing in general, I think, is a lot more technical than when I was writing short stories or whatever. It's
engineering, your problem solving, your way
this has to be here, so this can be here. Like, we're watching Sopranos right now. I'm watching Sopranos for the first time on episode 10.
And they're a technically brilliantly written show.
So many technical choices all the time that I'm like, oh, they've done that so that this can happen later. And I'm just seeing it more now than I probably did before I started working in AAA. But it's so
that's
technical.
Why I definitely subscribe to the school of thought that act structures are bollocks, but they're useful. They're essentially what is it a 3-act structure, is it a 5-act structure, is it whatever act structure?
I do like a 5.
In reality, that's just causality. That's just sequences of
helping you
interlocking
organize
pieces.
Yeah,
I like 13 acts.
But honestly, Troy, you could write a book about how every movie is a 13-act structure, and it would still be a useful resource because it would get people thinking about what that is.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious when people take those things very literally, which is a very kind of, to me, that's something that everyone kind of does at the start of their writing career. And then what you realize is, exactly as you say, it's setups and payoffs and rule of 3. It's useful. All of these shorthands are useful because they just force you to think about causality and setups and payoffs.
And so much of video games is like a lot of how do we make sure the player and the protagonist align? And how do we make sure that the player feels the same way about this as this? And like, how do we make sure, like, how is the player going to react to this? It's so much of that plus scope. Like so much of
and
can
that's
we
and
afford
the scope
that?
is
No, okay,
the
got
scope
it.
is sometimes the question is how can we pull the player towards wanting what we need them to want right now. There's
sure.
a little
Dude,
bit of that as well. showing
Don't
your
even
hand.
get me started on that. I the whole thing is like, well, why are we there? Because we need them to be there.
Yeah, because
Well-
it costs $5 million if they can go in that direction instead. And
We
haven't
just
got
need to
$5
have them
million,
come here. I'm
yeah.
like,
I
well,
did
then you
not-
need to change your game.
I
You
did
need to
not
change your
realize
story.
how expensive things were. Like, and that's still something that I'm still figuring out every day. Is like this? No, it costs too much. Got it. Okay.
I think
Like,
that's
it's
the. I think the
hard.
thing that the question I would ask, and probably will hopefully get a chance to ask him at some point. I would
right
ask
here.
Neil about is. I maybe you've had this conversation, Troy. I would love to know from his perspective what having 10 years as a gap has allowed in terms of, because the idea that you could basically have your story out there, have everyone react to it, see what that is, and then kind of go back to the blank page.
You're
to an
seeing it in the
extent
show.
and go.
Like you're literally
That's why
seeing that in the show.
I'm interested in what that process was and what that kind of and where he would place the focus, where he would say, "Well, actually, I feel like I really learned this as a writer.
Well, yeah,
I
because
really
there's no
saw
way.
the audience react
Like,
to
there's
that."
no way he'd be.
He's not the same person.
Well, no, but you also never stop improving. Like, I had a conversation with someone the other day where they were like, "Oh, this person's my age and they're way more successful than me or way more talented. I'll never get there." And I was like, "What's your age got to do with it? You could still go to school and learn." So even if Neil was amazing 10 years ago, he's still gotten better in a decade.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't end. I don't think when
Comparison
you're
is the
pursuing
thief of joy.
For sure,
But
yeah.
it is also a great metric. Like time and distance from something is the metric. And this is the other thing that I think is making that is making this show successful is that who is in charge, who is at the helm, are two people that are the most passionate people about telling this story than anybody else on the planet. And
As is the case with every video game company known for good storytelling.
That's true.
but it's
Every
also
single video game company that anyone would name as like, oh, they're really good at story. There's always a writer in charge or very close to being in
Animatrix Studio is
charge.
very
like,
story
always.
first studio.
and the struggle with
Because the
Neil
writers
is
have
that
power.
yeah, he's literally the person that could go at any desk at Naughty Dog and go move and sit down and do it. And that's a rarity. But I think that Neil and the conversations between he and Craig, of Craig going, and so much Craig points us out, he goes, this is another result of one of my pesky questions of like, why is Fedra in the outskirts? Why do you have them attacking Tess in episode 2? Wouldn't that be clickers? And Neil's like, yeah, because we needed to do this. He was like, great, okay, well, we don't need to do that. So
Yeah, had Craig played The Last of Us prior, like a long time ago,
oh
or was it a?
yeah.
Okay,
Like,
so I
he
got the
is-
impression he was a fan.
This is what's so, oh,
But it's
man.
nice to have him as like a person who's worked on TV come in and be like, hey, questions about this? But even
Because
then,
he's
have to
in
be
the
there.
engineering analogy, this is a plane
He's
and
a
he knows
TV
how to
engineer.
build cars, so he's pulling this stuff over and he's working out how to reconfigure it to
Yeah.
Here
suit
is the
this
arc,
new medium, right?
and this is what everybody obviously was like. Well, yeah, just if we could do that, that'd be great. Everyone, it's the arc of it is this: will you please make my thing? And then someone goes, "Ooh, we want to make your thing." And then the other person goes, "This is the thing I want to make." And the other people go, "We want to make whatever you want to make." So the fact that, when The Last of Us came out, and we've already talked about this, is like there's no other video game that when the seeking of the adaptation occurred, only one game had come out. Never. That had never happened. Everything was always a franchise. That was like Tomb Raider, Halo,
Yeah.
anything. There had been a franchise established, Assassin's Creed, Uncharted, all of those were established franchises before the adaptation was sought. Last of Us, one game. We want to make that. And the process of going, is it a movie? Well, I don't know. Why don't you write the script? Ooh, this doesn't work. Is it this director that's attached to it? We're not sure. Can't do it. It falls away. Finally, not only that, Craig Mazin, who's an incredibly accomplished, established writer, gets a success, gets a win. Chernobyl, he's now, poster boy for HBO. And they go, what do you want to make? And he goes, you get me anything that I want to make. It's going to be, I want to do this story. Can we get it?
oh, it happened that way.
Yes, Shannon
Yeah.
Woodward, while working on...
It was his inception. It was his. I can do anything I want to do. Last of Us. That's really interesting.
But that's the other thing. It's not so much, hey, we want to pitch this to HBO. HBO was like, what do you want to do? We'll give you anything you want to do. And he and Neil had just had lunch, and Shannon Woodward, who played Dina in Last of Us Part 2.
I really like her. She's really cool.
Great. You would love you guys. Y'all's humor is very similar.
We've
She's
chatted
just got
a
this,
little bit.
She's awesome.
Acquainted. Yeah, she's really cool.
And a brilliant writer too. She says, here, Craig, friend, meet Neil, friend. You guys go do stuff together. So they go have lunch, and Neil said, what would you do? And Craig goes, this is what I would do. And so Neil goes, I like this. What do we do next? And Craig says, we go across the street and we go to HBO. And they did. And they went over and they was like, hey, Neil said, I got to sit back and watch as somebody else pitched my thing and didn't say a word. And Craig, he's like, did a great job of pitching it. And before they left the room, HBO goes, well, what do we need to do to get in business together? And that's how the show was made.
That's amazing.
That is phenomenal. It is truly phenomenal. It never happens that way. But the result of that is the show.
Normally there's 70 pitches, right? That's the thing. Like, I think that's something people really
multiple
underestimate about Hollywood.
studios.
Yeah.
Every, oh my God, the number of times, working John Wick, I had to re-pitch John Wick.
Yeah.
Often
to the same
people who were already on John Wick. Yep, the same people. A room where everyone was the same, but one person had changed.
Gary hasn't.
There is a
heard
reason
this.
that
He has some
every
questions.
single movie has someone planning a presentation, because that's all Hollywood is. It's just a series of presentations and pictures.
That's really cool. I just have so much faith in HBO, and again, like you said, if we're in a good era for TV, again, I know I'm not watching a lot of good TV. I've not seen Succession. I'm not watching Yellow Jackets. I haven't seen White Lotus. It's all this stuff that I know exists that I haven't seen.
White Lotus season 1's going to hit a little bit different to you because you watched this first. I'm going to say that.
Really?
You're like, ooh, this is Frank the early years.
Exactly. This is the life Frank left behind.
Yeah.
What?
Holy shit.
I don't know what's happening, which seems good.
Oh, sorry. The guy who plays Frank is in White Lotus playing a very different character.
I am moved.
He's brilliant.
I am moved by Murray Bartlett so much so that he was not at the premiere, and I'm kind of glad because I don't think I would have been able to get my shit together.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's a star.
He's a buff. Anyway.
They were both fantastic. It's both incredible choices. But yeah, I feel like this is the amount of faith that I have in what HBO does while also watching through The Sopranos is there is some goddamn good TV.
You also watch their arc, and you go back to Oz, right, where it's 4x3
Rome,
shitty cameras,
Deadwood, all the
I love
vintage HBO.
Deadwood and Boardwalk. I've watched both of those twice.
An hour of Ian McShane telling me Deadwood production stories was the best.
It doesn't really matter when it happens to happen, baby. Of course, darling.
Did I tell you that we got that he was in the booth, Troy? He was demanding that he read your lines because he thought your lines were better than his. And he was like,
I want to read this
character. I'm like, you play this character in the movie.
It doesn't matter. Let me read this cunt's lines. I like this cunt better. Who is he? I would have walked in and been like,
He did ask who's playing this role, and I was like, oh, Troy Baker. He is.
Never heard of him. Doesn't matter. He's a cunt, and I think he's beautiful.
I think I've said this before, but Westwood does this thing where the monologues always have action, and that's I sometimes read screenplays for people.
Westwood or Westworld?
Or Deadwood.
Sorry,
Deadwood.
Deadwood.
I combined
Dead
the
West.
two.
They were shot on the same sets.
Deadworld and Westwood.
It does this thing where all the monologues have action, and I read screenplays for people sometimes, and it's very easy to do it for games where I'll give them tips or something before they enter a competition.
Well, that was the era of sexposition as well, right? That was the term
means.
that was used. You do your exposition during a sex scene, which was very Game of Thrones, Rome.
The monologues that Ian McShane had whilst...
Oh, Ian McShane had some amazing
whilst
monologues
getting
in
head
various
is
situations.
so good. Because it's so easy to so many, again, junior screenplays really do this, and it's just two people sitting in a room, and then they go and they sit at home, and I'm always like, hey, could this scene be happening because she's neurotic and this is an anxiety thing? Could she be cleaning during this? Or can we think of something to make the action tie into what's happening?
Sometimes you've got a limited indie budget and you have to get the circular game made, and the characters just have to say
the subsurface circular.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Mike. But I think the way that they do it in Deadwood.
There you go.
A show I've seen that I keep forgetting is so like someone is cleaning, someone is getting a blowjob. There are so many things that happen while they're evoking emotions that are directly tied to who the character is that I think about it all the time of the exact choice of action and how it ties to the monologue, because I'm not actually a huge fan of monologues in general despite loving Shakespeare. It's something that like I think it takes me out of a person sometimes if they don't feel like something that a human would actually deliver and say. But if you have them in an action, sometimes I rant when I'm in an action. And I think that show specifically is like, okay, what would they be doing? And how does it apply to video games?
It also typically for actors will all of a sudden they have nowhere to channel all that energy. And so it just ends up being bigger performances.
Oh, that's interesting.
To carry.
So actually, it kind of you can almost have like an anxious performance that they are going too far because
Brad
they
Pitt
don't have
choosing
anything to
to
do with
eat.
their hands.
It's like I
don't
have
have anything
something
else
to
to do.
do, so everything is being
That
funneled
explains a
into this thing.
lot of performances I didn't like.
They're too
often
big.
People who aren't they're too big, but they're not doing anything at the same time. That's interesting.
Well, that's
Can
a
you
direction
tell me
issue as
that
well,
you're in
I think.
despair without running your fingers through your hair? Shit like that. The strudel scene in Inglourious Bastards. It's like, can we give you a focus point that is diegetic, right? So like the actors, the characters are focused on something that you are too. This is something that Neil and Craig, I'm not sure if they coined the phrase, but I'm going to give them the credit for it. Emotional action scenes. And as we get further into the story, especially in episode 6, you'll see some of the biggest emotional action scenes where, for
You
all
keep
intents
talking
and
about emotional action scenes, and you keep not watching RRR, and that's just
because
upsetting
I
to
think
me.
you need help. I'm going on a flight.
RRR.
Is it literally the letters?
Letters RRR, because it's basically the origin of the name is that there's essentially two of the biggest stars, and that is it. I think it's Tallywood. I might be saying that wrong, but a specific film industry
Of the Rhode Island Tallywoods.
It's not a Bollywood film?
It's not a Bollywood film. It's often called a Bollywood film because that's kind of the Western kind of way of.
Yeah, this
but
thing
it's from
doesn't
a different
exist.
part of the,
Look, I'm glad that you wrote a script.
It's
Send
called
me the story.
RRR. I need to say this because it's the best thing ever. The movie is called RRR because there is a director with the surname beginning with R, and two of the biggest stars in that cinema are their names start
What is
with
it
R.
on?
So it would
where
be
am I
like
gonna
if
find it?
Spielberg directed a film starring
SSS?
Stallone.
You mean
and-
SKG?
yeah,
So like Spielberg, Katzenberg, Geffen?
exactly
funny.
like that, but with much less profits than DreamWorks.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
Exactly.
What
really
is
good.
it? Where am I going to find this? We're doing a plug.
In the UK, it's on Netflix.
All right, I'm going to look
Yeah, I
at
had
RRR.
floated a thing.
Annoyingly, it's just the Hindi dub
Hey,
on Netflix. Though. You
what do you mean
can't see the
annoyingly? It's
original.
just the Hindi version.
No, I
Well,
said
because it wasn't recorded.
annoyingly.
It's not filmed in. It's
You
not filmed
imperial
in.
bastard.
It's not filmed in Hindi. It's filmed in a different language, which I'm forgetting the name of embarrassingly.
Well, it says Hindi.
That's the Hindi dub.
That's the Hindi dub. It wasn't recorded in Hindi.
Oh,
That's actually a massive
really?
controversy that Netflix have released the Hindi version on there rather than the original.
That's a shame.
Which, has caused some local frustrations.
Hmm.
But it's very good, and definitely don't watch it in English. But
Yeah, I
it's
bet.
brilliant. It's beautiful.
great VFX.
And it is full of emotional action scenes.
I love that. And it's something that I think I feel very strongly about in video games, not across the board. I think I love games that have cinematic cutscenes, but I personally am a very big advocate for if we can show a relationship or tell a story during action, I'm going to opt to do that over a cutscene. And I think that's just like also a fun and challenging experiment that watching this stuff and even watching The Last of Us TV show and seeing action and how relationships develop during action is something that I think is very fun to explore more and more. Like how do you make sure that the player can engage in something while having an emotional scene that doesn't end up with a Half-Life, they just jump around while they're locked in a room. It's
Yes.
it's an interesting, it's probably been my favorite challenge. And it's part of, I think, narrative design that is very, very, very interesting, is how do we make sure that players can still play something without, because I think especially now people keep pulling their phones up instead of watching a cutscene. Like, how do we make them continue to play while still keeping them super emotionally engaged?
Where that's starting to happen is, I mean, Naughty Dog had in-game cinematics.
Naughty Dog.
Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog. Hey, you Miss Westworld.
I say
Westwood.
things wrong all the time.
Vivian
Sometimes
Westwood.
I say the wrong word all the time.
Have you? I was gonna. Sorry, you were about to go. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say most people are trying to find a way to keep the player on the stick in some way. can we narrativize or make that a cinematic moment, but still keep the player have agency? And I think that there is a point to that. I think there is something cool. However, I was talking to a director about this the other night, and it was like, we want to shoot this like a play. I'm like, it's not a play if there's a camera. And that's a trap that people fall into. Whereas if you want to have a play, go do a play. And you can do Welcome to Dogville, and you can just like put it up on a stage. But the second that you put a camera on it, it's a movie. And that's okay, but you are directing the audience to be there. And if you're going to do that, you better know how to fill that frame. And if you don't, and you want to do it haphazardly and you fix your tools afterwards, there's challenges to that. There's also freedom in that, but there's also a lot of challenges to that.
Have you done a lot of work that's interactive in terms of I think you're most associated with a lot of really great kind of performance capture work. But have you done much in the way of interactive in the sense of like recording different dialogue strings and path? Obviously you've got this coming up with the musical game, but you've done. Do you think that's the future of this stuff? I definitely feel
think that's
like
a
we're
shortcut.
not going to.
I don't.
So you don't. You don't.
By the way, I think those are great. I think branching dialogue is great, whether you play Mass Effect or. I was clearly a huge fan of the Telltale games.
That to me is how we've definitely kind of pivoted as a company towards that a bit more, just because. Essentially, I got bored as a game creator, kind of constantly giving you just like something to watch instead of playing. So making it an interactive conversation definitely kind of
agency is the
us.
currency, and so what we're trying to do in games right now is give players more agency. However, most people just give branching dialogue, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving them agency.
But
it's
like,
agency, we're just going to come back to this anyway. So the second that you show, anybody can look behind the hood and go, "Oh, this is just plywood." Then you shouldn't have done that. Just tell your story. And places or games like The Last of Us or whatever are great examples of just tell your story and do it well, and people will be satisfied with it. You don't have to give them even a wide linear path. You can just go, no, you're on rails. This is where we're going. Fucking inside, dude. You're on rails. But it's a brilliant, beautifully
executed thing. Is that not also
thing.
plywood? That's just a different... That's just... less plywood, but better focused plywood, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, go deep,
doing
not
a
wide.
really good job of a specific illusion rather than spreading yourself thinner.
What game did a really fucking good job of that? It Takes Two. And they did a really good job of it's not dialogue choices, it's a relationship between two characters, and they are having to solve problems together while going on that journey. And the way that they did it, I think, is like they have a million mini games. Like, I'm more fascinated by how literally how the producers on that game worked than most games. How did you make that many different systems? It's so impressive. I just want to sit down and talk to them and be like, how did you do this?
How as much as why?
Right.
But it works. Like, it works really well.
Absolutely. But just in terms of like I always think of the kind of the first meeting on a lot of games, like that pitch.
What was the decision?
To go back to pitches, that must have been tricky.
Wild. It's very, very impressive though. And I agree with Trey in that I like dialogue choices in some cases. I think that they serve a purpose, but I don't think...
Well,
I
and this is...
think they're the necessary...
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all at all. What I'm interested in is whether there is a hybrid that's going to emerge.
I think so.
End up with a situation where we can have something as directed as what you're talking about, Troy, in terms of it has the camera is pointing in a specific direction to tell a specific story, but still has the agency on the player. I don't think we've cracked that yet. It seems like there's something's going to come down the river. And probably, honestly, you two are both... I think more likely to find it just because you're working in the spaces that have the budget and the space to kind of innovate.
It's always going to be led by
expense.
It's the people who can afford to be the loss leaders, right? So I think that it's going to take AAA in order for that. It's the same thing we're dealing with right now. Like the tools that are in the hands of the AAA and the super indie were forged from the mountains of the AAA.
I've never heard super indie before. I've never heard. No, I still hate AAA. My mate Paul genuinely coined the phrase AAA sarcastically and has regretted it ever since because it never went into massive usage. But super indie I've not heard before. What's
like
a super
indie, man? Like we're like publishers won't even
so
look at us. We have to beg Epic. We have to beg Stadia to be on.
Do I have to become?
That's how
do I have to become?
We are.
Do I have to work? I have to work towards being a super indie.
Our score only comes on vinyl.
Am I already a super indie?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're actually only available on SNES, so that's how indie we are.
You're not a Troy super indie. But you might be a super indie.
You're a super indie. I think that
This is all the validation I need. This is
all you
I'm
need.
sorted for the week now.
But I think I think a lot of innovation comes out of indies. Like something like Inscription could never be made in
Oh,
to
it
play
does,
up.
but I think it comes out of indies in a different direction. I think
Right.
the thing,
It's very
I think
limited.
like me and Troy talk a lot about about I feel like that's we talk a lot about kind of upcoming things and like, oh Mike, are you doing performance capture for your next game? And most of the time my answer just has to be no, we're probably below the threshold for that
Yeah.
financially.
Yeah.
And
not
I
even
think that's-
financially, but like, what does it benefit you? Because if you're
Exactly. Well, that's
creating
what I'm saying,
a whole
whereas-
system of like,
because the stuff, to put it really bluntly, I'm excited to see the future of stuff that requires performers like Troy involved in it, and that stuff is going to be in the AAA space. That's my point. There's a threshold to finding this hybrid, and there is a financial threshold and a similar threshold.
But I think Hitchcock
AAA is on the other
applies.
side of that.
Hitchcock applies here too, where it's like if all else fails, use dialogue. Like, can you tell? Again, I go back to Inside. Can you tell your story without a single line of dialogue? If you have to have them talk, there better be a good fucking thing they say. But if you base your premise on, well, we're a dialogue-driven game, I'm like, shit.
Have either of you played Tunic?
I started to.
I have. I love the language stuff in that
Love
is
Tunic.
brilliant.
Yeah, not even really in English.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
a game
yeah.
that doesn't have a tutorial that there were parts of it where I was finding it too hard because I hadn't picked up a certain page that would tell you how to level up, so I didn't know you could.
Modern players will never understand how hard it is to do tutorial. The idea of doing tutorial without text. I'm not a good enough game designer to do
Witness.
that. Like, it's
Incredible.
wild.
I want to
It's a
do a
whole
game
language.
that has no tutorialization and no HUD. Like, no
Tunic
no,
does have
no
a HUD.
UI.
What Witness doesn't have UI. And have you
I mean,
played the
Witness
Witness?
is like all UI, right? Like, it's UI in the
Technically,
environment
the
you're
whole
going on.
game
Well,
is
the same
UI.
thing
They're
like
like
Her
different
Story,
UIs.
right? That's
Doesn't.
UI. But like, if you have like this cool diegetic UI, I think that's
Dead
awesome.
Space. Great
Dead
UI.
Space. I got. Is it on Steam Deck?
I'm not sure.
I want to play it because I'm hearing great things. I'm also
very
Craig
good.
recommended a game. There is no game.
I haven't heard of that.
Neither did I. It's stuck under the
That's a
radar,
great
but it's on the old deckies. I gotta go.
Yeah, I do too. But I was also gonna I wanted to give a shout out to Hi-Fi Rush.
I'd like to just point out our short episode is 50 minutes long.
we
That's
nailed
pretty
that.
impressive.
Hi-Fi
There's
Rush
preamble.
that just came out from Tango, who probably best known
Is
for
that good?
Evil
It's
Within.
installing on my
It's
Xbox right now. I can't
so
wait.
fucking cool.
Wait, what is this?
Hi-Fi Rush.
It's
They're made by
annoying
Tango.
'cause it's a game I've always wanted to make, and I'm annoyed that
It's
someone else got there.
so good.
so
They're known
good.
for Evil Within and also Ghostwire Tokyo, which is actually like it makes a lot of sense if you see them go Evil Within, Ghostwire Tokyo, Hi-Fi Rush, but very different things. And I always love seeing studios do that, where like Guerrilla went from making Killzone to making Horizon. It's so cool to see. So stylish, so fun, so upbeat, and just like makes you feel very, very cool while playing. And it's on the beat, and you got this protagonist who's clicking and like stomping his feet constantly as his animation. It's so cool. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to that before we wrap up today. Totally check it out. It's I think about 12 hours. And I think it's on Game Pass.
Oh my god.
It is on
Very
Game Pass,
oh yeah,
that's
because
where
it's
I got it.
Bethesda,
Yeah.
so it should be. Yeah, it's fucking cool as hell. Like just incredible. And
I love that big studios are letting projects at that scale happen.
Pentiment.
Like, that's incredibly cool. Pentiment's
I think that's a
brilliant
positive
example
of Game
it.
Pass.
Yeah,
in that instance,
it's and knowing the shape of Game Pass deals, it makes sense because it's similar to like early Xbox Live Arcade. So
Yeah.
kind of Xbox Live Arcade before the indies arrive.
What do you think the budget
So
of that
had
game
this
was?
kind of stuff
Hi-Fi Rush.
of
No, Pentiment. Jesus Christ.
Well, it was only 13
Pentiment.
people.
13
if you
people.
were looking
Or
at
maybe
it, I
less.
would put it at like
That might have been Grounded.
2 mil. I'd say about 2-3 mil.
Wow.
But to be honest, making it in a big studio, it's probably more because there's a lot of overheads. And
I think it
stuff
was less
associated,
than
even if you
13.
are
I think
making-
Grounded was 13 and Pentiment was less. I don't remember, but I did talk to Josh about it. But
Oh my Jesus.
yeah, it's 2 mil sounds like so much, but I don't even understand how video game budgets work because
That's
like-
a 3-hour
Well,
episode.
somebody gives us
I
money.
don't. Yeah, but
Literally
like
published the book on it.
it's just very confusing because salaries and I don't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, burn rate, man.
It's very
Team
confusing.
Fortress
all-
2.
it's all
Hi-Fi
about
Rush,
cash flow.
play it on
It's-
Steam Deck.
It's always
All
cash
right.
flow.
It's very, very cool. You
Budget
should check
matters
it
less
out.
than cash flow.
Do I want the deluxe
Especially
edition?
indie.
What does it get?
I'm not sure. I just got whatever was on Game Pass. But yeah, we have to head off. Thank you for watching, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.